letters that Paul really did write. The reason this is important is because Paul was writing before the Gospels. The Gospels were not the first books of the New Testament to be written. They were relatively late. Paul's writings were being produced in the 50s of the Common Era. In other words, about 25 years from the traditional date of Jesus' death, between 20 and 30 years of Jesus' traditional death. Paul originally started out as a persecutor of Christians soon after Jesus' death, probably within 2 years. If that's the case, it would be worth knowing, what does Paul know about the historical Jesus? Yes, Paul thought that Jesus was a divine being who was also a human being. Paul does think that Jesus was a divine being who was also a human being. But he firmly believes that this divine being became a human being. Paul is often faulted for not saying more about Jesus than he says. He doesn't talk about Jesus' baptism, his temptation, his Sermon on the Mount, his exorcisms, his triumphal entry, and lots of other things. He's faulted for not saying more on the grounds that if he knew more, he would have said more. That's possible, but it's not really probative. What does Paul say? Paul tells us a number of important things about the historical Jesus based on what he knew. He indicates that Jesus was actually born physically, that he had a woman as his mother.
Firstly, it clarifies that Paul's Galatian statement of born of a woman was born in heaven of a woman. Secondly, it also explains Paul's strange use of words, and why he used the term genomenos, which means something like created by God, rather than genos, meaning born.
That he came from the line of King David, that he had brothers, one of them was named James. He had 12 disciples, one of them was Peter, whom Paul knew. I want to focus on 2 points in particular that Paul states about Jesus. The first is one that is central to many of the debates about mythicism. It comes in Galatians chapter 1, verse 19, where Paul says that 3 years after his conversion, so this would be, by my chronology, about the year 35 or 36, the Common Era, he says, after 3 years, I went to Jerusalem to visit Cephas. I remained with him for 15 days. Cephas is Peter, Jesus' closest disciple. But I saw none of the other apostles except James, the Lord's brother. The brother of the Lord. Paul knows Jesus' brother, and he knows Jesus' closest disciple, Cephas. The word brother in the New Testament always means one of 2 things. A brother means a blood relative who's born to the same mother. That's one of the things it means. In other words, it means what brother means. The second thing it means is it sometimes often refers to members of the same believing community who stand in close solidarity. And so you can talk about your brothers, Jewish brothers, Christian brothers, depending on what your faith commitments are. Those are the 2 things that brother means in unambiguous cases in the New Testament. In any context, they're free to do that, but they need to have clear and compelling reasons for thinking so.
Now, brother is one of Paul's favourite words. So in all of Paul's writings, he uses the term brother 111 times. And for all of these occasions, we can work out from the context that Paul is referring to brothers in Christ, or church members, not to physical brothers. But we have no other examples of Paul referring to physical brothers for comparison.
Other than the fact that they don't want to think that the word means what it means. In Paul's case, when he says that James was the brother of Jesus, what does he mean? He cannot mean simply that he was somebody who stood in close solidarity with Jesus, because he's contrasting James with Cephas. He's explaining that he met with Cephas and with the brother of the Lord, James. In other words, Cephas is not the brother of the Lord. You get the same phenomenon in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 5. If Jesus didn't exist, then surely his best friend and his brother would know about it. They didn't know about it because he did exist.